Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A little surprise meeting of the last meeting of the House Regulated Industries Committee, maybe, but we still have one more day, so something else could come out of the woodwork. But before I start this meeting today, a couple of folks I think we need to pay homage and thanks to. First and foremost, that little lady right over against that wall, Jan Brown. Do not want to be remiss. She's the one that she looks after everybody on this committee, regardless of party affiliation or anything else, and is the gatekeeper to me, I guess, if there is such a thing. And just how much I appreciate Jan and what she does just for me and the committee. Brian Hyde, the undeserving guy who is most deserving. Quiet, subtle, and he's actually a lawyer for a lot of y'all who don't know it. So he is sharper than you think. And then we have Sean Marie somewhere in Zoom land out there.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Wherever you are. Oh, there she is. Lovely Sean.
Hello.
Right, Sean Marie. Sean Marie.
Love
you, girl.
But anyway, Sean, before we take up the business at hand today, I do want to wish every member a prosperous interim. This has been a difficult session, to say the very least. We will be dealing with some issues in the interim this year. So that most of y'all know, this committee is the Lottery Oversight Committee, and we will be dealing with several meetings dealing with issues that need to be taken up with the lottery this year, both in COAM and in their operations of other things. So I just want to put that on your plate, and but this won't be any time in the next few weeks. So I want everybody to get the breath of fresh air, move forward, and put some collective thoughts into what went on. And let us all move forward and try to work for some better relationships in this unholy and unhealthy political environment that we're living through right now. That being said, today we have one issue today, and that's House Resolution 427 by Representative Earhart. And if you would, before you start now, do we have anybody signed up that wants to testify today? We only have one. All right. Just hold on. Representative, please have at it.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for coming in at this late hour today to hear this resolution. I bring before you House Resolution 427, which would establish a House study committee to examine the public funding, transparency, and membership of the State Bar of Georgia. You know, it's interestingly, I have had a unique opportunity within the past year or so to be involved in a study committee, chaired in part by our Regulated Industries chairman, and that was the Economic Development Study Committee. And I had an opportunity to understand the value and the nature of those subcommittees when perhaps it is a deeper issue that can't necessarily be fully investigated and understood at any given committee meeting. The study committee is a valuable tool available to legislators, whereas you can create a forum in which citizens of our state, interested parties, that may be involved in the nature of any bill or legislation that may affect them can be brought to the table and discussion can be had. I learned a tremendous amount about economic development in our state and the nature and involvement or potential involvement of casinos in the state of Georgia. In much the same way, a subcommittee of this nature would allow us to look in a little bit more in depth into the nature of the mandatory membership of the State Bar of Georgia. Since its creation in, I believe, 1963, I'm unaware of any committee ever formed at any time that looked into these issues. So by definition, what this would do is create a state bar, create a study committee about the state bar that would be comprised of members, House members appointed by the Speaker, 3 that he would assign, and 1 that would be assigned by the minority leader of the House. It would also include a member of the state bar on the committee, a former or current judge or justice of any Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, also, or the Supreme Court appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and a citizen member who is not a licensed attorney, also appointed by the Speaker. So a wide variety and plethora of members on this House, each with the ability to bring their own unique perspective to the table. The purpose of this, the committee shall undertake a study beginning on line 67 to examine the mandatory membership required of the State Bar of Georgia and whether it would advance public policy and transparency and allow meaningful citizen engagement in the administration of justice to require the mandatory fees and monies collected from the taxpayers by the State Bar of Georgia be deposited into the general treasury of the state for annual appropriation, and to recommend any action, legislation, or resolution for a constitutional amendment which the committee deems necessary or appropriate. So there's no telling really at this point what the committee may suggest, find, or recommend. What this simply does is open up an opportunity over the course of the next 6 to 7 months to have conversations and to bring some voices to the table and take a look at what we need to do. The committee is allowed, I believe, up to 5 meeting days without having any additional authorization required. So with that, committee members, I will attain, and Mr. Chairman, I will attain any questions that you may have at this time.
All right, number one, who's that? Mr. Walensky.
Thank you, Chairman. I got several questions, if that's okay.
Have at it.
Thank you, Chairman. I assume the study committee is being brought because something was reported wrong that the State Bar is doing. What is the State Bar doing wrong?
Often, actually, study committees are not necessarily brought forth because something is being wrong. I could contend with you that the study committee that I was a member of last year involved looking at the casinos. They had done nothing wrong. It was simply an opportunity to bring voices to the table, examine the issue at hand that might be impacted by any upcoming legislation, and make a better educated determination about whether or not legislation was necessary. Again, just because you establish a study committee doesn't mean that we're going to, there's no way of knowing right now what determinations might be made. It simply creates the environment in which analysis, for lack of a better word, can be made on the subject.
The purpose of this analysis for this committee is to look at the membership dues and the fees.
It's to look at the mandatory requirement. When you say membership dues, it's very important to say that these are compulsory mandatory dues. Attorneys in the state of Georgia do not have the option as to whether or not they want to be a member of the state bar. Essentially, it's 2 layers of compulsory membership. Number 1, you have to be a member of the state bar in Georgia to practice law. Number 2, to be a member of the state bar, you have to pay the dues,
So the
or you
study-
cannot practice law.
This study committee we're creating is solely because we are wondering if it should be mandatory or not.
We are taking a look at this issue to determine whether or not, like many other agencies and associations across the state of Georgia that do not have necessarily compulsory dues, or that do have them, but their funds were appropriated by the General Assembly. So it's to take a look at the state bar and find out what's different about them as compared to other agencies. Is this the right course of action in terms of having their dues be compulsory and not having them appropriated by the General Assembly? And quite frankly, for the first time in many, many years, to bring those voices to the table.
I'm a little confused, so let me just.
What part
is the-
confuses you?
Is the part we're looking for the study committee to figure out whether the dues should be mandatory or not? Is that one of the main things?
That's one of the things that they will look at.
Has there been any evidence of fraud with the money that's received by the state bar that you know of?
I don't know that the study committee is being necessarily created because there has been evidence of fraud. I do know that there have been significant voices being heard that I have heard from attorneys in my district, attorneys across the state, who have expressed some concern about the nature of how the bar expends their funds and whether or not there should not be an additional layer of accountability. Again, simply a discussion, right? On the nature of that arrangement, how it is arranged, and is it still the best protocol? Is it still the best protocol moving forward? There are 17 other states in our nation that do not require mandatory membership in their state bars to practice law. So it's simply taking a look. Never hurts to look.
So there's two purposes of this. One is to figure out if it should be mandatory or not, and two, where the money and funds are going. So why are we creating this committee?
For the reasons that I just stated, right? That we want to take a look at the bar. We want to have a really clear understanding, because a lot of folks don't know, a lot of folks don't realize this. And the fact that this affects citizens across the state, right? It's a wonderful opportunity to bring voices to the table, to take an examination of it. I always say with a study committee, that is your opportunity to. Did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Now, have you reviewed the minutes that are public that come out from every meeting that they have?
I have looked at some of them.
Okay, and have you reviewed their annual budget that comes out every year?
You know, the interesting thing is I've not reviewed I've seen their annual budget. I have not reviewed it in detail. Whether or not that is an aspect of the study committee, whether or not they would find it useful to take a look at those documents would be up to that study committee.
Can you specifically identify why we're forming this subcommittee? I got the mandatory
Right.
pay, but then what are we investigating? What is the purpose of the committee?
The
Just to-
purpose of the committee is to determine whether or not mandatory membership in the State Bar of Georgia is still appropriate
Okay.
at this day and age. It's also to determine whether or not the compulsory dues are still necessary for the most efficient running of our state bar. It's again to bring this information to the table, take a look at it. Oftentimes, and I know this particularly has happened in a previous subcommittee that I've been involved in, oftentimes new issues and new questions rise to surface during the course of the study committee.
Have you met with anybody in the state bar to find out any of your answers?
I've actually had a couple of conversations with people who are members of the state bar. I have.
Okay, and what consisted of those conversations? What did you find out?
Well, I mean, the members that I know, people who I personally know who are members of the state bar, do not appear to be afraid of shining a light on the actions of the bar. They don't see a problem with transparency, and that's what this is about. This is purely and simply an information discovering process is the purpose of the committee. It's not,
yeah.
let me be very clear, Representative Walensky, this is not an indictment of the state bar in any way. On the contrary, a member of the state bar would be on the study committee.
My understanding is, as a state house, we only have so many special committees we can put forward. So this is a very good examination of the importance compared to other study committees we have, of whether we should move this forward and the
Mhm.
importance of what we're finding out. It's my understanding that the minutes are all public, all of the annual audits are public, the budget's public. So I think we can all find that without forming a committee. But have you talked with Attorney General Chris Carr, who's a voting member of the state bar?
I have not spoken with him. I have not. Mm-mm.
Are you aware that most states have the state bar set up exactly like we do, and there's only one state in the entire US that has it set up a different way?
I know that 17 states do not have it set up the way that we are. I'd be happy to read them out to you if
No,
you'd
you're
like to
talking about
know.
mandatory. I'm talking about the way the funds are, where it doesn't
I
come
might-
out of the.
Yeah,
Well,
in all honesty, Representative Litsky, if I may close out here with you, I appreciate that you can probably pull these isolated instances of how bars do it in different parts of the country. That really is not the nature of the study committee. The study committee is trying out whether or not this is the best format for Georgia still to this day.
Can I ask one more question, Chair, and then I'm done?
Please just be sure you're asking questions. We're not in court, so.
Oh, this is,
I mean, you're-
I was about to have the court reporter read something back. I apologize. If everything is public in terms of their finances, and the meetings are even taped and you can review them, what are we investigating?
You know, the fact that you mentioned that the finances are public does not necessarily mean that all of the members of the state bar, all of the attorneys in the state bar agree with how the budget is arranged. I mean, this is never a nature of them not hiding things or not disclosing their budget. The question is here whether or not mandatory involvement, mandatory membership in the bar is suitable at this time in the state of Georgia. Very clear. If you want any clear synopsis of the purpose of and exactly what the subcommittee would be looking at, it begins on line 67. Okay, so examining, I don't know how many times I can, or how many different ways I can say this. We are examining the mandatory membership requirement in the State Bar of Georgia.
So
I could almost, and I know I don't usually direct questions to you as a committee member, but what is your opposition? I mean, what would be your concern about forming a study committee of this nature?
once again, can I answer that, Chair? That's a fair question.
Before this gets out of
I
hand,
just answer.
let her present her bill, ask the questions and move forward.
Yes, sir. I'll answer that question and I'll be done. As I said before, we only have so many special committees we can form. And I know there are ones that I've heard that are incredibly important. And I'm just trying to understand the importance of what we're undertaking and why that cannot be done in a separate form.
Understood. I think you might be outnumbered there. I think there are quite a number of members of our body that do consider this actually a very important study committee. The fact that you personally don't find it important, I appreciate that. But in general, we're looking for the consensus of the body.
That's why we're here.
And certainly the State Bar and the associated attorneys across the state of Georgia have a tremendous impact on the citizens, the everyday citizens of Georgia. That's where I believe lies its importance.
The citizens aren't all members. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 14, Mr. Ridley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend down there with the luxurious hair that I wish I had. Let me answer a couple of questions for you. One, this thing was formed in 1963 and by the General Assembly. It's a normal practice for General Assembly anytime that they form any kind of committee from time to time to go back and look at it. To my knowledge, there's not been any kind of look at it through this committee since it's been formed, from what I understand. So it's kind of a normal practice once we make something to kind of do follow-ups with it. I know no one ever looked at the lottery from, I think, 2007 to a couple of years ago. They'd not been audited and they'd not been went through. Wasn't nothing that we found wrong. There were some practices maybe we didn't agree with, and we went through and did that study committee. And so this is just something that as legislators for the state and for the citizens, if we form something, it's our responsibility sometime or another to go through those and make sure everything's working out the way it's supposed to be. I understand you keep pointing on the financials, that they're public and that stuff. Well, it may not be a financial problem. It may be problems internal or the way they're running things or something. And maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe there's not. But that's the whole purpose of doing these study committees, is to see those internal workings, to see some complaints that we've had, to see if they're really just somebody that's mad or there's something really there. So that's kind of the reason we do these. And I know there's just a number of them that we can do per year. But like she said, I mean, there's Representative Bearhart said, there's been several people that's kind of wanted us to do this over the years since I've been here. I've heard this come up several times. So that's the reason that I signed on the bill. And that's kind of what we're looking at. It's not, we're pointing fingers at anybody. It's just something we need to do as our job is to follow up. If we form something, to follow up, make sure it's working the way it needs to be done.
Well said. Let's see. Representative Williams, did I see you that you had and you're 11?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. I have a number of friends who are lawyers, and I've been on both sides of the lawyers, for and again, but being started in 1963, just to put it in perspective, Don Hogan was about 60 years old back then. But yeah, it's like a private funded state professional board. I think it's something that we need to look at, and the transparency. And while we're at it, I think we need to license roofing contractors. You know, they're kind of wild out there too, but no, I think it's a good bill, and I think it'd be a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Jackson online.
Representative Jackson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions for Madam Chair there. I understand that this is a study committee of the State Bar. And I know you've outlined a few in response to our colleague, but my question is, are there no audits that are done of the State Bar?
I'm aware of any audits that are done. That may be certainly an issue. I could imagine that as being a question that comes up and perhaps a point of discussion within the study committee.
And so, because it's my understanding that there are some audits that are done, but I'm not a lawyer. But in my little bit of research, there are some audits that are done as it relates to the state bar operations and administration of their duties. And so I guess my question is, could you provide some examples that would merit the need? And I want to go a little bit beyond just your response that you gave Representative Walensky, but I'm just talking about, if we're just looking at finance, that's one aspect, but based on my research in preparation for today's committee hearing, the state bar operation and their administration duties is pretty wide and deep. And so if we really want to do as other has mentioned about, something being created since 1963, would it behoove the General Assembly to take a good grasp, scope, and scale of this study?
Okay, I'm not sure where I may have missed the question there, but I did hear you mention
The
broad-
question is, you in response to Representative Walensky, you said it's only going to be looking at these dues and comparing these dues as it relates to other states. But my other two colleagues said, this has been around since 1963. So would it behoove us to having a more expansive study if we're really going to examine the state bar? Would it behoove us to really look into the operation and administration of their duties if audits are not done?
Thank you for that comment and that question. I see what you're saying in terms of the breadth, the broad breadth. The Bar Association does have a broad breadth of responsibility, no question about it. I think the reason that we have honed on specifically on these particular aspects of the bar, meaning the compulsory membership and the compulsory dues, is because those compulsory dues act, for all intents and purposes, like a taxation. It is essentially a tax on the citizen attorneys of our state. And for that reason, we think that it's important at this time to maybe take a look at that specifically. I do understand what you're saying, and I certainly imagine that that is a conversation that could continue in terms of increasing the expanse of the study committee. I don't know. I cannot speak to that at this time, but I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Walensky again.
I have a motion to amend at proper time.
This is not the proper time. We still have some questions, which will be recognized.
Thank
Vice Chairman Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me that the thrust of this is to seek some transparency here, mostly about the compulsory membership, not about any alleged misuse of anything. Seems to me it's a positive thing, and if there are other people who've asked for it, I commend you for bringing it, and it seems to me that it is needed, and I don't see that any additional investigation and any additional transparency ever hurts anything. So I commend you for bringing it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'd just like to reiterate there that certainly this can be a very positive thing. I mean, I anticipate and I would hope that the State Bar would certainly welcome the opportunity to shine a light on this and come to the table and have a seat at the table in these discussions. Thank you.
Chairman Hawkins.
Good afternoon. How are you? We heard this bill 166 by Earhart earlier this session, and she did a very good job then as she's doing today. She held off about 8 attorneys that day. I've got a daughter and a son-in-law, they're attorneys, and I like them. But I think that Representative Earhart has a point here. I think she's articulated the point well, and I hope this committee would consider her request on this study committee.
Any other questions of the author of the bill right now? If it's not, we have one person signed up to testify. Mr. Elmore,
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
welcome.
I appreciate that. My name is Damon Elmore. I'm the Executive Director of the State Bar of Georgia. I grew up in Savannah. I went to college there, moved to Atlanta in 1993, and I say all that to say that I'm Georgia too. We're here today, though, to listen to the details of the proposal. We're here today to offer some thoughts if warranted. We're here today to certainly answer any questions about the work that we do as we came before for 166 and as we are when we sit in our offices and invite people who have interest or questions to come by. If you don't know, I'm relatively new in this role. I just started in January, and I think one of the things that I regret is not having had an opportunity to chat with most of you and show you the work that we do, to talk about the work that we do, to brag about the work that we do, and to answer many of these questions that have come up here. We have a lot of things going on at our bar, a lot of new things. Even in the session that we were here before, we heard a lot, and we are aware of some of that feedback, and we don't take it for granted, that's for sure. You know, a lot of the questions or the discussions talk about oversight and transparency. I think it's really important to understand the great relationship that we have with our Supreme Court and the oversight that happens there. The Supreme Court continues to direct and guide where our budget dues are set. They continue to direct and guide what our rules are and where we should be established. What's more important is the work of our Board of Governors. They recently approved our budget, which is available on the website, in a meeting that was supposed to take place at Brasstown Valley, but it couldn't. And that budget was passed by a consensus of the body, as a matter of fact. So I think most people that are there to take action on behalf of their constituency certainly made their voices heard at that time, and we approved that budget. We are also audited annually, and I know that that question came up, and that's nothing to take lightly. We are insisting that everything that we do is clear. We are insisting that everything that we do is a part of the work that our members need, and we want to provide that member value. And you know, the state Supreme Court in all 50 states governs lawyer discipline and the practice of law. A majority, as Representative Walensky said, have an integrated bar model, like where the bar does licensing and provides member benefits. I think he was referencing one bar in the United States in Alabama, where it sends its money through the General Assembly, but then it also comes back to the bar for them to set the budget before anything final happens there. I think it should be noted that we have some of the lowest dues in the country. That's important, particularly when you consider the work that we do that is designed not only to provide that member value, but really is created with the aim of protecting the public. When you think about resources that are available to our lawyers so that they can have up-to-date and accurate research so that they can be prepared. And we're not talking about just big firm lawyers. We're talking about lawyers in all points in between that we want to make sure have that access and are on an equal footing when it comes to the administration of justice. We're talking about member benefits that include a wellness component, similar to something that the Georgia Composite Medical Board does, as a matter of fact. So we have lawyers who are fit to practice and who are well to practice so that the clients that they have and the public that they serve are getting the best value. And we are excited about those programs. If there is a dispute related to fees, members of the public and clients can come to the State Bar for a fee arbitration opportunity. We have a consumer assistance program that is designed for people that have issues or concerns. We do all of that, We perform all of that. We support all of that in the work that we're doing. And then there are also other pro bono opportunities so that we don't forget those who can't access directly legal services, but might need some help or some support. That's just a real highlight of the work that we do. But as we continue to talk about some transparency, we feel and we invite you to check out our website or call my office, and I can give you additional direction where you can get the answers to any of the questions that you have, and certainly providing that for all of our members. Mr. Chairman, I can answer any questions that members of the committee.
Thank you
may
so
have.
much, Mr. Elmore. Questions?
Representative Jackson on one.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Elmore, thank you with clearing up the question around audits, because like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I always like to make sure I do my homework before I come to any committee hearing. Could you share with us some examples of what the audit surveys or review or actually go through?
Sure. So in addition, Representative Jackson, thanks for the question. In addition to the financial component of the audit, we are very strict in making sure that member dues are used for purposes that our members have approved or are consistent with governing law related to those dues. As an example, we have had a lobbyist down at the legislature to support packages. Those aren't paid with member dues. Those are paid with private contributions. So those auditors will look and examine the financials and make sure that they're consistent with what they are supposed to be doing. But we are also making sure that we take the extra step to show that we are not taking advantage of the funds that we have. We are using them or in accordance with the rules that are set for us internally and just from a global landscape. And we're doing the best things that provide member value at every step.
Okay. And my last question, and I appreciate that. My last question, when I think about member dues, every organization that I'm affiliated with, they have member dues. I just can't think of any free lunches out there in terms of when you affiliate with an organization. Could you share with us, do you have a significant number of lawyers, members who protest paying their current dues? If so, how many? Is that a significant issue that we should be absorbing our energy in?
Representative Jackson, it is not. And while I have been in this role since January, I served on the Board of Governors for the State Bar of Georgia. I served on the executive committee for the State Bar of Georgia. I served as an officer at one point early on in my career with the State Bar. And throughout that time, beginning really in 1997, I have not heard that feedback or concern. I will tell you, though, we have vigorous debate when it comes to setting the budget. And we get amazing feedback from members all across the state that want us to be aware of some concerns that they may have or things they want us to make sure that we keep in mind. So we vet our budget appropriately, but no, I have not heard that feedback or concerns related to it, particularly since our dues are some of the lowest in the country. This year, not even seeing an increase for the third year in a row.
Okay, and my last question, there's been discussion this afternoon around transparency. I have many friends that are lawyers. I can't think of any more transparent place than the State Bar. I mean, everything that you all do is online, minutes, and everything is published for the public consumption. Is there any area of the State Bar, and I know you say you've been there since January, but is there any area of the State Bar that could raise concern that you all are not transparent or you need to become more transparent for Georgians?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Bentley, I mean, Ms. Bennett, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not the strawberry queen. No, I'm not a funeral queen. So thank you very much. I have a question to you, sir. In lines 20 through 24, I understand that the State Bar is a mandatory organization which requires any person wishing to practice law in this state to pay an annual license fee. My question is twofold because it appeared as though what I heard was that the study committee is proposed to examine the mandatory membership as well as the mandatory fee. Would it be pursuant upon the bar itself to make a recommendation based on the vote of the membership as to whether they choose to continue to have this mandatory requirement, these two mandatory requirements? Would that be something that the membership itself could vote and recommend back to the legislature?
Yeah, sure. So there's certainly an opportunity for a lot of debate concerning that. I'll have to think about your question a little bit more. The issue has never been brought up in a meeting that I've been a part of. And I think that everyone that is at least a member of the State Bar clearly understands the value in its membership and what the organization is designed to do. I think that's a novel concept for sure, Representative Bennett, but no, not familiar with it having been brought up as long as I've been a part of the bar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for misidentifying you. Representative, your light's on?
Yes, it is.
Is it 9? I got you.
Mr. Elmer, we're here today because the proposal of the legislation wishes to have a study committee on the bar. Are you opposed to this legislation?
The difficulty with that is clearly as the executive director of the State Bar, I don't understand the value. I don't see the value. I think that there are resources that could be allocated in different ways to focus on other things that matter in the state. And part of that is chiefly because I know we've got the oversight. I know we've got the transparency. I know we provide the member value. So I don't get it. And I think there are more questions to be asked. And I just don't think that it's an effective use of resources going forward when all of that exists.
The resources to be expended would not only be the state's resources to mount up the study, but the resources to be expended by the State Bar and replying and then to the study. Is that what you're referring
No,
to?
I'm worried about the state's resources, about the public's resources, about the taxpayers' resources. We would do what's necessary to do to be a part of that process if it were a case, but those are the resources that I'm worried about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Mitchell. Let's see, these lights just keep on going. This has got to have been one of the more popular study committee resolutions I've ever seen. I didn't think there was a whole lot needed to be looked at, but I'm beginning to think that maybe there might be. Vice Chairman Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative Mitchell has covered what I wanted to ask, which when you rose today, you said you were here in opposition to it. And I really just sort of wanted to know why you would oppose it, because with everything you have said about the State Bar and how it operates, then I was just curious about why you would resist the idea of the study committee. But I think you've already answered that with Representative. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Chairman? I'm looking at you. Your light's on.
Hawkins or me?
Oh, is that you?
Yes, sir. That's me.
Mr. Ridley,
All
I'm
right.
sorry. Chairman.
I guess a couple of questions that just came up. You said that y'all take private funds to fund the lobbyists out here
Correct.
for yourself. Do you not think that that is a fairly dangerous issue to have, that you're privately funded, taking private funds to fund a lobbyist?
That's a fair question, Representative. They are separate funds. They are not part of the member dues that provide the
that's-
lobbyists.
that's
Other people
exactly-
can make, right. So
I understand that, but
Yeah.
so I'm a practicing attorney. I have to pay in dues to you. Which, by the way, I've had several complaints that attorneys fear retribution from y'all if they do complain about having to pay into the dues. But at the same time, I'm having to pay into this thing to be able to practice in this state. But yet somebody's privately funding lobbyists that are down here to make decisions on my behalf.
No. Again, Representative Rivers, those are separate funds. A member can elect to make contributions to support the legislative program. Those aren't private funds. Those aren't other people that are involved with it. If that's what I communicated, then that was not correct.
So
They're
I
just separate funds.
So I have to pay in my funds to be a member of the bar. I don't have any recourse on that. I have to pay those if I want to practice in Georgia. But if I want to be part of some legislation that either I'm for or I'm opposed, then I have to pay extra funds into another account.
No, that is not true at all. You can be a part of the process. We have an advisory committee on legislation that vets any legislation that may be germane to the practice of law every year. You can come down and you can tell me whether you like that or don't think that it applies to the practice of the law. You can give to us as an individual, as a member of the bar, your concern about other stuff. But usually anything that we have as part of our legislative program is only going to be those matters or those bills that are germane to the practice of law. That is it.
Okay. And I think this is more the reason to have this study committee is to get us all to explain all that to us. Because what we're hearing is kind of two different things. And I think that's the worth of this bill is to fill everybody in. That way, when we get calls back home, we can say, well, we've done a study committee, because you're going to have complainers and you're going to have people telling the truth. And that's what we need to separate. And I think that's a good thing about this study committee is being able to separate those. That's the actual issue and somebody's just upset about something, but that's the concern I had. I still really don't understand it, but I'm good enough for now, Mr. Chairman.
Done? Well, Mrs. Bennett again. Is that you again? You're recognized.
Thank you so much. Just a clarification. The Secretary of State's office has a number of professional organizations that we pay dues in order to practice in the state of Georgia. For example, the Dental Associate, the dentists, nurses. So I just want to be clear that there are a number of professional associations in the state of Georgia whose, in order to practice in the state of Georgia, we have to pay some dues. We have to pay membership fees.
Sure.
Does the state bar also, do the attorneys in the state of Georgia also, in addition to the state bar, are there also professional licensure fees that they have to pay, or does the bar satisfy that requirement?
The state bar satisfies that requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, sure.
Hey, Mr. Carpenter, we have another country heard from. And what is your number?
17.
There you go.
Thanks. Yeah, so just because I don't know how it all works. What are the yearly fees for the state bar? And somebody may have said that, but I walked in a little late.
Yeah, sure. So it's less than $260 if you're an active member, less than $160 if you're an inactive member.
And so how many lawyers currently?
Well, it depends. We have we have a number that says 52,000, but that includes active and inactive members. If you're talking about active members of the bar, that number's more around the 30,000 mark.
Okay, so 30,000. And then you said 160 to 260, depending on what it is. Okay.
Yes.
And just a comment more than a question, but our representative just spoke about the other licensing boards that we have, and I think that's kind of a valid conversation. Is all those budgets, I believe, flow through the budget process at the state, and this one does not, and that's kind of a point of this legislation / study committee. But I'm just here to watch the fireworks. But I appreciate what you do, but I also think shining light's always a good thing. So Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative.
Chairman.
Yeah, thank you,
Collins.
Mr. Chairman. I guess it's more of a comment than it is anything. I mean, we had we had House Bill 411 this year, the DA oversight bill, prosecutors oversight. I guess my concern there is, if I thought the state board was doing a really good job, we wouldn't need House Bill 411. I mean, attorneys should be ridiculed by the state bar. And so I'd like to see this study committee go forward for no other reason than to just see what your oversight looks like.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's very important. Now, I would love to be a part of the study committee. Well, I'm going to have my hands full doing another little project for the speaker and the rest of the folks here in the state. But I'd love to see this go forward. I think it's a great opportunity for us to look and some transparency and credibility and accountability. And nobody wants their homework checked. I get that. I understand that, but I think this is very appropriate given the political climate that we're in and what's going on in our state. I mean, I just don't understand why there would not be open arms from your organization to say, come in, let us prove to you we're doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, Representative Collins, and that's a climate that we work in. But let me talk about House Bill 411 because maybe is the answer to that. I think the challenge with House Bill 411 is that we do have bar rules that would govern and deal with that type of issue. I'm worried that the process wasn't completely understood, right? That doesn't just happen unilaterally because anybody could make a complaint about something. And so we've got some due process that we want to follow, make sure that there's either a violation of the law that would have been started, which may not have existed in some of the examples that were the Genesis 411, or there's an actual bar complaint before we take action. That's really important. But that has also changed too. I think the Board of Governors considered some of that feedback and put some more teeth into some of our bar rules that do deal with some of those issues. And so that's the way that we work. If there are some challenges that we haven't seen before, we fix them and we make them right.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Elmore? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I respect Chair Collins' opinion on that oversight. However, my concern is that based on lines 67 through 74, there's no investigation of oversight here. So I don't think this would meet that standard. I'll also ask Representative Carpenter, I know you were late, but we discussed that in terms of the financials, there's most states in the United States do it the way we do, and there's only one state that doesn't. So if we're going to do it the way most states do, then we're going to continue on how we're doing. We are leaders. Yeah, that's great. And then in terms of my question, I forgot. So thank you for being here.
No, Representative Walensky, you were going through some of the issues of oversight that we addressed. We talked about the way that other states are, and it's funny, the legislation wants us to conform with some of those, but we are leaders here.
I have a motion at the proper time.
Well, it's still not the proper time. We have Representative Jackson to be recognized again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we continue to have this conversation with Mr. Elmore, and this hearing a response from my colleagues, it just prompts another question or two. And I promise, Mr. Chairman, this will be my last. Mr. Elmore, is the latest audit available for this body to review, or is it online?
It is online, yes. We have completed a recent audit, which will be online, but the most recent version is online, yes. Okay. And my last point, I think it's more of a statement than a question. It's just interesting that a lot of quote unquote oversight this legislative session, even to the point where we take and remove constitutional officers' responsibilities. And so I don't know how far we want to go when we start talking about oversight, because there are so many organizations
that any Georgian can say needs more oversight. Military, aviation,
Goddamn.
agriculture, farming, etc. So when I think about the state bar, and certainly there always room for improvement, Mr. Elmore, can you share with this body that I guess your board of governance, how you all look at things internally, look at things externally, check the climate of laws and practices and cases, and say, here's the top 5 or 10 things that we need to correct? Is there a is there an internal body in the state bar that says, here are some issues that no one's asking us about, but we're going to take it upon ourselves because we are leaders and we have a responsibility, moral and ethical, to make sure that we continue to improve our system, if you will, throughout Georgia?
Yeah, sure. That's easy, Representative Jackson. That's our Board of Governors. That would mainly be the body that's going to vet those kinds of issues. But let me tell you a little bit more about our structure and how that happens, because there are a number of ways that these issues may become before the Board of Governor in order for them to make some changes, make some improvements, consider some new things. It could be the national landscape. It could be changes to our laws, certainly. In addition to those members, 160 strong, representing all of the jurisdictions from all parts of the state, we have a number of committees that are designed to focus on issues of interest to the public and to the practice of law. And those committees will do their work and usually come up with some ideas that they will present to our executive committee first for some initial vetting, and then it will go before our Board of Governors. None of our meetings are boring. All of them create or bring up new matters or issues that we want to constantly evaluate as it relates to the practice. And the reason why they call it practice, because it is continuing to evolve and to continue to change with the times. But the answer to your question is yes, that's our Board of Governors that's mainly responsible for that.
Is that it, Mr. Jackson? All right. All right, Mr. Walensky, one more time.
Last question.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I was on mute, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
I remembered my question. Thank you, Chair. We've heard from Chairman and Representative on the end about this idea that attorneys are not saying things to the state bar due to retribution. So first thing is I would highly ask that you speak to them and find out who these attorneys are so you can work with them, as the state bar always does, I know, to see if they, we need those names. Y'all need those names so y'all can work with them and see their concerns. That's really important. But can you list every form of retribution the state bar has available if an attorney complains about a problem they have with the state bar? If there are any.
And an attorney is free to complain about something that they don't see the same way or some concerns that they have. And our role and our responsibility is to listen to that, examine it, and see if there's any thing that we need to change. But there's no retribution that would happen to any lawyers that would happen as a result of that.
How can the state bar punish those people? Do they have any means?
But I think I'm a little confused, Representative Walensky, and I understand exactly
I'm
what you're
confused as
asking,
well.
but we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't punish anyone for bringing up an issue that they have a right as a member of the organization to bring up the issue. The only time that a lawyer will get in trouble, as one of my young children would say, is if they violate a rule or if they violate a law. And at that point, then we make sure that whatever is appropriate, we would make a recommendation to the state Supreme Court, and they will take action, which up to and including disbarment for that, because those things affect the public, those things affect the citizens, those things affect our clients. But if someone's speaking their mind or has some concern, nothing happens there.
No more questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we did ask for some of those names and we did not get any of them, Representative Walensky.
All right. If there's no more question, do we have, if you'll hold on, do we have anyone else that wishes to be heard today? Paint drying on the wall always shows its ugly hand. We thank you so
Thank you, sir.
very much.
Thank you, members of the committee.
All right, before my move for the question, I want to make just a statement here, and I know that this is, first, I want to tell my good friend, Chairman Collins, be careful what you ask for that you'd like to serve on such a study committee. Because I dared say something about election reform, and next thing I knew, I spent 3 months ankle deep. But, you know, this is a lot longer than I ever expected a committee meeting to get involved in, to talking about a study committee resolution. You know, we do study committees all the time. I remember once upon a time, somebody did a study committee about making sweet tea the official drink of Georgia. I remember somebody once upon a time put in a study committee about moving August between the month of January and February to warm up the winter months. But, you know, there's a purpose for these. There are a purpose for study resolutions. And I can certainly understand, I know probably more than I need to know about the state bar and how this is all orchestrated, because I've been here for almost 32 years. I have a great amount of respect for the bar. And one of the respects was no more than what he said. We got 52,000 licensed lawyers walking the streets of this state. If that doesn't literally scare you to death, I don't know what should. But there's got to be some order that's got to be kept. And the wisdom of those days, in an earlier day in 1963, the General Assembly was mostly made up of those colonels and the barristers of old, because they're the ones who were actually able to come up here and to pass laws. And in their wisdom, they put together such a process to control and to organize and to run an organization. This probably got to be the most contentious group of folks has ever been, because they are advocates and they all have their own minds. And, you know, we all know how attorneys are. So it takes a special type of organization, whether that's the best way of doing it in this day and time, because we don't have the attorneys today, the volume and the number of attorneys that serve in the legislature that we once did. As a matter of fact, we've even got a funeral home caucus, I think, that's got more undertakers and embalmers too on the committee, that have probably about, they're getting pretty close to having as many members of that caucus as attorneys today. So times are changing. So what I see here for the members of the committee is what is asked for, and it's gone way too long and into the weeds. But I see what's here, and this is to take a look, not just at dues but the transparency, I think, is probably the bigger gap. Everybody want to get into the dues. You know, nothing was said about there's a base due, but I'm sure that there's other dues that come on top of that for specialty credentials and such. I don't know. But, you know, I would say that, you know, that's the purpose of this, and that's to basically look at it. I don't know that there's a witch hunt out there or anything else, because after all, it's in the Constitution. That would be a monumental task to change. But for the purpose of that being said, this is a study committee. To those of y'all who see things that you shouldn't see, take it at what it is, that is legitimate. Because I can assure you there's some things that would be worse than this study committee resolution. And that would be assigning the Regulated Industries Committee to start holding hearings of their own to start looking into it. Because this committee has certainly done a lot of things and been called on a lot of times to do that. So that being said, I'm going to call the question. Mr. Walensky, did you want it to be recognized? If you do, push your button. All right, you're recognized.
I would like to make a motion to amend.
All right.
Just on line 67 to 68, putting a period after Georgia. And
All right, if you would, if you make, I thought you were gonna make another motion, so if you're gonna make a motion to amend, first I need to have a motion on the bill. We have a motion on the bill. We have a second. Now, you're recognized.
thank you, Chair. Yes, I waived that other motion. Line 67 through 68, put a period after Georgia, because from what I've heard is the main question we're dealing with is the mandatory membership, and nothing else here discusses oversight or anything else but where the monies go. So I put a period after Georgia and remove everything else from 68 through 74.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second. Discussion or questions concerning that motion? None. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All in favor, raise your right hand. Or your left hand, depending on which one you prefer. Four.
Yes, sir.
All opposed. I believe that's pretty clear. We have an ambidextrous down there waving two hands. All right, that motion fails. All right, any other motions by any of the committee members?
I'll make one more motion, sir.
All right, you're recognized for that motion.
Motion to amend. Line 67 through 68 after Georgia, adding and for the purposes of transparency, period, and removing everything else through 68 through 74.
All right,
Just last one.
all right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? We have a second. All right, any questions concerning that amendment? Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? I don't believe we need a hand count on that one.
I
Unless
don't,
you'd
Chair. I
like
thought we
one.
wanted transparency, but yes, sir. No more. I'm done, Chair. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Any other comments, questions, or any other member wishes to make an amendment? If not, all in favor, say aye. Oppose? I think
No.
ayes have it, but I will call for a vote if you wish. No, ayes have it. And this bill moves on to the Rules Committee. And I kind of like where they spend their money for lobbyists because he's a friend of mine.
Hey there, friend. Enjoy your long weekend.